WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's May Day in Dakar, Banjul, Accra, and Monrovia. 1 p.m. in Abuja, Cotonou, and Niamey. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. This is Newslink. Here are the top stories. Ghana's special prosecutor files criminal charges against 10 senior officials of state oil company for conspiring to extort $28 million.
The investigation primarily targets the following persons: the coordinator of the UPPF, Mr. Jacob Amwa, NPA staff Freda Tando, NPA staff Wendy Ashon Newman, and the former chief executive of NPA, Mustafa Abdul Hamid.
Nigeria's President Tinubu holds a special council meeting in honor of late head of state Buhari. Vote counting continues today after Togo's municipal elections.
C'est l'élection la plus boudée par le peuple togolais.
It is the most blown up election by the Togolese people in the last 20 years, and more particularly for this election, it is happening under repression, which the Togolese people have suffered.
Il cherche à rester au pouvoir toute sa vie.
And the 15th summit of the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries gets underway in Guinea-Bissau. Details of these stories and more are coming up shortly.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
We are glad that you have joined our broadcast. This edition of Newslink begins in Ghana as the Office of the Special Prosecutor has filed criminal charges against 10 senior executives of the National Petroleum Authority (NPA). The prosecutor accused the former chief executives of the NPA, Dr. Mustafa Abdul Hamid, and 9 others of conspiring to extort over 280 million cedis or $28 million from oil marketing companies and bulk oil transporters. But even before the case begins in court, Dr. Abdul Hamid is firmly rejecting the accusations, describing them as baseless and politically motivated. As WADR's NAD reports, the accused has vowed to defend his reputation.
The special prosecutor alleges that between 2022 and December 2024, former NPA boss Dr. Mustafa Abdul Hamid, acting as chair of the Unified Petroleum Pricing Committee, conspired with fund coordinator Jacob Amwa and NPA audit staffer Wendy Newman to extort millions of cedis from oil marketing companies under the guise of official charges. In February this year, Special Prosecutor Kisi Jabing hinted at this case during a press briefing.
The OSP has also commenced investigation into suspected corruption and corruption-related offences in respect of an alleged embezzlement of 1.3 billion cedis from the Unified Petroleum Pricing Fund (UPPF) at the National Petroleum Authority (NPA). The investigation primarily targets the following persons: the coordinator of the UPPF, Mr. Jacob Amwa, NPA staff Freda Tando, NPA staff Wendy Ashon Newman, and the former chief executive of NPA, Mustafa Abdul Hamid.
Court documents now allege that Jacob Amwa transferred 24 million cedis directly to Dr. Abdul Hamid, while Wendy Newman handled over 227 million cedis on Amwa's instructions. 5 others, including directors of Openness Limited and Kel Logistics, are charged with laundering the funds through property deals, vehicle purchases, and construction projects. The OSP says the scheme was aimed at concealing the source of the funds. One suspect, King Logistics Director, is on the run. Dr. Abdul Hamid's lawyers have dismissed the allegations, accusing the OSP of shifting claims from an earlier 1.3 billion CD embezzlement allegation they say was never proven. They insist he denies any wrongdoing and is ready to contest the charges in court. All 10 accused, currently on inquiry bail, are expected before the Criminal Court 3 on July 23. For WADR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
Elsewhere, Nigeria's seat of power, Abuja, came to a solemn pause on Thursday as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu presided over a special Federal Executive Council meeting held in honor of the country's late former President Muhammadu Buhari. The event, staged at the council chambers of the presidential villa, was more than protocol and all personnel. WADR's Usman Umar reports that President Tinubu has also renamed a tertiary academic institution in the northeastern state of Borno in honor of the late Nigerian leader and statesman.
The late leader's children, led by Yusuf Buhari, sat quietly as the president, his ministers and other members of the cabinet took turns to offer glowing tributes. From reflections on leadership style to memories of private encounters, each voice added a layer to the unfolding portrait of a man who left office just 2 years ago and whose death has shaken the nation. President Tinubu, in a calm but reflective tone, described his predecessor as an honorable man, a phrase repeated with weight, perhaps in acknowledgement of the controversies and convictions that shaped Muhammadu Buhari's time in office.
His life was a rebuke of vice and a refuge of virtue. The purity of his private character gave radiance to the discipline and integrity of his public service. Even in death, he maintained the serenity that defined him in life. Not a sigh, nor a groan, just a quiet submission to the will of God.
The Abuja ceremony followed an earlier one in Daura, Katsina State, where the Vice President Kashim Shettima led a federal delegation to the late president's hometown. It was the third and final day of the Fida'u prayers, an Islamic supplication for the dead.
It wasn't a loss to the family of the dead president. It was not a loss to the people of Daura Emirate or the people of Katsina State. It was a major loss to the nation and to the African continent.
As the nation continues to mourn, the politics of remembrance have begun, with legacy now in the hands of those left behind. Already, the University of Maiduguri, Borno State, northeastern Nigeria, where the late leader once served as a military governor, has been renamed in honor of the late President Muhammadu Buhari. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Crossing over to Liberia, where thousands of citizens gathered in the nation's capital, Monrovia, on Thursday on the banner "Enough is Enough" to protest against the government's policies and practices. Organized by the Solidarity of Trust for a New Day Stand and its partners, protesters highlighted critical issues such as soaring unemployment rates, rising living costs, and long-standing concerns about governance, transparency, and leadership. The protest held on Thursday was a show of public frustration, calling for urgent change and accountability by the Joseph Boakai-led administration. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The petition intended for delivery to government officials was not successfully handed over as protesters rejected designated officials over the unavailability of President Joseph Boakai. The demonstrators in their petition, among others, called on the government to end corruption at all levels and to implement greater transparency and accountability measures. Tatos Bakal, on behalf of the group, read the petition.
Number one demand, immediate dismissal and prosecution of all government officials in incredible reports of corruption, independent audit and criminal investigation of the National Security Agency, Ministry of Public Works, Liberia Petroleum Refinery Company, Liberia Water and Sewer Corporation, National Port Authority, and the Ministry of Mines and Energy, firing and prosecuting of police Inspector General Gregor Como.
President Joseph Boakai, who was attending a public function during the ongoing protest, acknowledged and responded to the comments by demonstration. Boakai assured of his government's commitment to move the country forward. Moba Malu, lead organizer of the July 17 protest, has issued a 14-day ultimatum to the government demanding that their concerns be addressed. Malu warned that protesters will return to the streets of the capital should the government fail to respond favorably. It should be noted that the Bouaka-led administration has faced a series of criticisms from the population over bad governance, abuse of office, and corruption since 2024, resulting in large-scale demonstrations. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
And now your dial in West Africa Democracy Radio on Thursday held a public debate on the security situation in the Central Sahel region and the threat approaching Senegal. The public debate was themed Security Situation in the Central Sahel and on the doorstep of Senegal, effects, challenges, strategies, and solutions. Several security experts, members of the civil society, policymakers, youth, community leaders, and others participated. Christopher Teacher reports.
The objective of the conference, which brought together several entities from the sub-region, was to propose effective solutions to the terrorist threats. Agnes Tomasi is the director of West Africa Democracy Radio.
L'objectif principal de ce débat est de créer un espace.
The main objective of this debate is to create a space for dialogue that will allow ideas that are likely to contribute to change in our region, in particular in the Sahel, based on the current security situation. We hope that the gathering of experts and analysts in the field of security will allow today's discussion to draw on ideas and recommendations that could be used in the future to remedy the insecurity in the Sahel and establish peace and stability.
Et instaurer la paix et la stabilité.
Several panels were moderated by experts. For Malian Baba Dakono, Executive Secretary of the Citizen Observatory on Governance and Security, effective action to combat insecurity requires going beyond ideological factors.
C'est vrai qu'on a focalisé pendant longtemps.
It is true that we have focused for a long time on the ideological aspects which is present, but it is not the only aspect. I believe that many researchers have already suggested other factors, especially sociological, economic, and political, that exist in the groups, and the solutions must integrate these different factors.
Ces différents facteurs-là.
The threat is moving ever closer to Senegal, and a civil military approach is needed for effective prevention, according to Frederick Ndike, an expert in governance and conflict prevention.
Senegal fait des efforts, mais
Senegal is making efforts, but its vulnerability remains real. Senegal should be attentive to the recommendations of researchers and specialists. The people in charge of this country should be very attentive to this and be as close as possible to the population. It is a military-civilian collaboration that allows us to be effective in terms of security.
The expert also recommended effective dialogue between state and armed terrorist groups. They also invite ECOWAS and the AES member countries to intensify the security aspects in their future collaboration.
Christopher Teacher Fight, that report. Still in Senegal, an important page in the country's military history is turning. On Thursday, July 17, the Senegalese army regained control of Camp Gili in Dakar, sealing the end of the French military presence on the nation's soil. An official ceremony marked this symbolic moment. The Senegalese and French armies have now agreed on a new partnership. Retired Senegalese Army Colonel Antoine Wadini explains the significance of this historic handover after 65 years.
It frees us. We take possession of our territory. That's normal. We can exercise authority over the extent of the Senegalese territory, which was not the case before. Because when the French were in their base, it was like an embassy. We couldn't exercise any authority there. Now that they have given us the bases, they have given us the keys. We are now sovereign over the entire extent of the Senegalese territory. We will take into account the infrastructure that have been left in place. We will examine them and see how to distribute them again. But it will not be a distribution with foreign troops this time, but allocated to Senegalese units who will use them. And if there is anything to learn, well, I wouldn't say it's 100% positive or negative, but let's say it's mixed. They served us anyway, and that must be recognized. After all, they formed our first authorities who took over the French army in our independence. They helped us to install part of this army, whether it was the land army, the air, or navy. They really did something. They trained most of our officers in their schools. That's something to be acknowledged. They equipped the army. They showed us how to make an army. They really showed us the way. I think we had time to learn too, and it was necessary at some point to let ourselves be flown by our wings. We cannot continue to be led like children, like babies. Otherwise, it will be useless to have an army. We could let the French army continue to administer us, to manage us, but as long as it is a sovereign country, it must assume its sovereignty, its dignity, its independence. So we learned, and we want to take back what belongs to us.
Retired Senegalese Army Colonel Antoine Wadini. You are still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Ghana's special prosecutor files criminal charges against 10 senior officials of the state oil company for conspiring to extort $28 million. In Nigeria, President Tinubu holds a special council meeting in honor of the late head of state, Buhari. Vote counting continues today after Togo's municipal elections. Still ahead in the news, the 15th summit of the community of Portuguese-speaking countries gets underway in Guinea-Bissau. We also have guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. The 15th Summit of the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries gets underway this Friday in Guinea-Bissau, marking the beginning of the organization's 2-year rotating presidency. Delivering a speech at the welcoming ceremony, President Umaro Sissoco Embalo of Guinea-Bissau emphasized the core values of the CPLP, which includes dialogue, cooperation, cultural richness, and a shared language. He welcomed each guest, underscoring the significance of these meetings in fostering fraternity among Portuguese-speaking nations. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is attending the summit as a guest of honor, reflecting Dakar's desire to strengthen its ties with the Portuguese-speaking world. On Thursday, President Sissoco Embalo held an audience with Simeon Oyono Angie, the Minister of State and Foreign Affairs of Equatorial Guinea, who delivered a message from President Teodoro Obiang Nguema in Basogo. And this marks the first time Guinea-Bissau is assuming the rotating presidency of the organization, succeeding Sao Tome and Principe for a 2-year term. Thursday evening also marked the 29th anniversary of the institution, created on July 17, 1996 in Lisbon, Portugal, with a commemorative cake and customary congratulations. Elsewhere in Togo, vote counting continues this Friday after yesterday's municipal elections. Approximately 4 million voters were called to the polls to elect their councillors. These elections took place in a tense socio-political context. A low turnout was noted overall in the country after civil society and opposition groups called for a boycott of the vote. Despite the election, these parties continue to demand the resignation of Fornya Sengmi, president of the National Council of Ministers. Nathaniel Olympio is a spokesperson for the Hands Off My Constitution movement.
It
is the most blown up election by the Togolese people in the last 20 years, and that's the result of several factors. First, there is the fact that the Togolese have realized that the elections in Togo are an instrument of confication of power. On the other hand, the elections have never changed the public policies that are being carried out. And more particularly for this election, it is happening under repression, which the Togolese people have suffered, which the Togolese youth have suffered. and which led to death a few days ago. All these reasons have led to the Togolese to vote with their feet, and this translates into the fact that the elections in Togo cannot constitute the solution to political and social problems.
Nathaniel Lumpio is a spokesperson for the Hands of Man Constitution movement in Togo. More on electoral matters. The recent meeting between Cote d'Ivoire's ruling Rally of Hufuetists for Democracy and Peace, RHDR, and the opposition coalition CAP Cote d'Ivoire marked the notable absence of the PDCR and the EPR, fueling the analysis of several observers. Some see it as the beginning of an explosion of the CAP Cote d'Ivoire in the run-up to the presidential election, while others put it into perspective and instead point to the difficulty for the opposition to speak with one voice. For more details, let's join Abdullahi Hassan.
With 3 months to go before the elections, latent tensions and power struggles appear to be emerging within the opposition. The CAP-CI is weakened by the creation of the common front between the PDCI and the PPACI, but also by internal differences illustrated by the absence of the PDCI and the FPI from the meeting it initiated with the RHDP. The perspective of Dr. Nuruddin Oyewole, a political communications analyst. In this polarized context, political analyst Serge De Souza believes that the PDCI, with its strategic position, could play a mediating role in uniting the two coalitions in preparation for the presidential election of October 25. In the meantime, the Independent Electoral Commission (IEC) has set July 25, 2025 for the commencement of submission of candidacies, a period that closes on August 25. The EC promises free, fair, and transparent polls. However, former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo, former President of the National Assembly Guillaume Soro, banker Tijan Cham, and Charles Blé Goudé remain ineligible due to court decisions.
Abdullahi Hassan fight that report.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest segment this afternoon focuses on WADR's public debate about security, which was conducted on Thursday as part of efforts to curb insecurities on the borders of Senegal and the Central Sahel region. During the event, stakeholders called for more community engagement with locals and diplomatic dialogue. Our guest is Frederick Ndeki, a democratic governance and conflict prevention expert who discusses various forms of terrorism and their modus operandi, plus providing solutions to tackle insecurity.
In the Sahel, there are various terrorist groups, some of them affiliated with the ISIS, Islamic State, some to ACME, and some of them are also affiliated with Al-Qaeda. We also presented other groups who emerged from internal background. Some of them are locally anchored. Some of them are from local people. And some are irredentis. Some of the grievances are about concern the local situation. Like in Mali, some, prior even to the emergence of these groups affiliated to the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, you had groups who were claiming autonomy or even independence, like the MNLA and the northern region of Mali. So there is a mixture of local groups, some of them who have been imported in the territories, and all of them have almost the same modus operandi.
Interesting. Let's now shift the conversation to talk about financing, because ever since these terrorist groups erupted, they've been very sophisticated in various ways, and that is made possible because of financing. How is the financing of these terrorist groups a sort of worry to the peace and stability that the sub-region ought to enjoy?
Yeah, the financing is the other big questions people are asking, and it's a bit complex. They are financing through the abductions and all the money they're getting from it. They're also doing it through the illicit financial flows. The region is an area where these illicit traffics, illicit in terms of drugs, human beings, all sorts of traffic, cigarettes, all sorts of illegal traffics are happening there with huge amounts of money. You also have some of them monopolizing critical minerals areas. There's this example one of my colleagues gave earlier on some in Burkina Faso, some terrorist group or these armed groups having the areas in the areas where they are exploiting ore, gold, I mean. So this is their way of getting finance. They're also being supported by external groups. There are also even areas where the populations also are forced to contribute. Populations are forced in some of the areas taken by these terrorist groups to pay sort of taxes to them.
In recent times, particularly the JNIM in Mali, they've become much more sophisticated, that they're actually moving towards the southern part of the country, where Senegal in recent times has actually experienced some attacks on its eastern borders with Mali because of the JNIM moving into the southern bit. I want to find out that from your point of view, what advice would you give to Senegal as a sovereign country to be ready to meet these JNIM terrorist attacks head on as a sovereign state?
Senegal is a coastal country. For these terrorist groups, access to the ocean, access to the coastal countries is very strategic for them. This is how they can easily, their logistics, becomes easily to manage. So access to coastal countries is one of their strategy. And Senegal is one of them. So if they have access to the ocean through Senegal, they will take it, they will use it. The same they've been doing in the countries in the Gulf of Guinea, countries like Togo, Benin, and even Ghana. So they're targeting these areas because they want access to the ocean. What I would advise, and we said it all here earlier, that Senegal should be more proactive, not just wait until they are attacked to react. So they should be very proactive, adopt a preventive strategy. They're doing it, but I think they still have to increase and to improve their strategy in this area. Senegal's official defense forces work a lot with local communities. They should be more inclusive. They should collaborate more closely with these local communities, especially in the border areas. So this is a key point for Senegal.
Frederick Ndiki is a democratic governance and conflict prevention expert. Here comes Sankule, the sportive Janko, with the latest in the world of sports. Good afternoon, Sankule.
Yes, good afternoon. Let's get straight to business and begin this edition of Sport News with tennis, because tennis star Ons Jabeur is taking a break from tennis to focus on her mental and physical health. The 30-year-old has withdrawn from the Montreal Open and is in physical health. According to her, she wants to focus on her health. Elsewhere in athletics, Kenya's Ruth Chepngetich, the women's marathon world recorder, has been provisionally suspended after testing positive for banned substance. The substance was detected in a sample collected on March 14, according to the athletics integrity unit. And in football, two of the most dynamic and ambitious women's African nations, Nigeria and Zambia, are set to lock horns in the high-stake quarterfinal showdown at the 2024 Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON on Friday this afternoon at 4 p.m. And later tonight, host Morocco will take on West African side Mali at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Sankule, for the sports news. And that's it on this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Falilu So and Umu Danyogo for the technical assistance. At 1 p.m., Demba Amaan will be here with the news in French, which is Info Chez Vous. I am Augustin Curley. Good afternoon.